Hi, everybody, and welcome to this edition of the Saving Civilization podcast. In this episode, we will talk about two views of history, one progressive and optimistic, and the other circular and pessimistic. Then we will examine how democracy has waxed and waned over time, and in particular, the reasons for why it has failed, what is called democratic backsliding. Timothy Snyder, in his book, The Road to Unfreedom, Russia, Europe, America, published in 2018, expresses two opposing views of history. The first he calls the politics of inevitability. This is the sense that the future is just more of the present, the laws of progress are known, there are no alternatives, and nothing needs to be done. The American version of this story is that capitalism and democracy bring prosperity and happiness. The European version centers on integration and cooperation between nations that results in peace. Inevitability sees history as linear, where things are improving. Inevitabilists preach that government is the solution to problems. These politicians focus on internal policy and how to make things better. Inevitabilists believe everything will sort itself out and that the good is what already exists. The second version of history is the politics of eternity. Here, the nation is a victim of forces that keep coming back to cause problems. Russia and China, for example, continue to see themselves as threatened by the West. Eternity sees history as cyclical, looping back to the same threats as before. Eternists preach that government is primarily defensive and is there to guard against external dangers. Eternal politicians focus on the enemy and distract attention away from themselves and their own failed policies. They see the ghosts of the past as returning no matter what, that evil is eternal, and that we are all victims. In both views, no one is responsible. Each produces a sense of determinism. One is optimistic, the other pessimistic. Recent events tragically suggest that inevitability is turning to eternity. In Snyder's terms, we see slippage across the world from individualism to totalitarianism, from integration to empire, from truth to lies, and from equality to oligarchy. Policy is being replaced by propaganda, and unity is being replaced with a fixation on the enemy. After the Cold War and the collapse of the Soviet Union, there was hope that dictatorships would fall and the entire world would become free.
So, an extraordinary night of euphoria in Berlin. Within hours of East Germany's decision to let its people go by opening the border to the west, the city erupted in a frenzy of celebration. East German border guards watched as jubilant crowds danced on the infamous Berlin Wall that's divided Europe for a generation. All night, thousands of Berliners from both east and west streamed through the crossing points.
On October the 3rd, Germany was reunified. It signified the end of the Cold War.
The historian Francis Fukuyama is famously quoted as saying that this was the end of history. Unfortunately, what we are seeing now is more like the return of history. Recent years have seen a global increase in the number of authoritarian regimes. Let's take a look at how and why democracy has been changing over time. The American political scientist Samuel Huntington identified three waves of democratization. democratic waves. The first wave was called the long wave. It started in the 1820s and lasted for almost 100 years. It was caused in part by the granting of suffrage to white males in the United States and by the breakup of the Russian, German, Austrian, and Ottoman empires. The second wave happened after the Allied victory in World War II and peaked in 1962. The third wave started in the 1970s with an increase in democratization occurring in places like Latin America, Asia, and also in Eastern Europe with the post-Soviet collapse. Just like the tides, each of these waves has crested and ebbed. Here we see a graph showing each of the three waves. The ascending part of the waves can be seen as the inevitable or linear aspect of history. The descending portions can be seen as the eternal or cyclical aspect of history. These ebbing waves are also sometimes referred to as democratic backsliding. Since the 2010s, the world has become increasingly authoritarian. More than 1/4 of the world's population since then has reverted back to autocracy. Here we see some contemporary examples. These include Viktor Orban of Hungary, Hugo Chavez of Venezuela, and Abdel Fattah al-Sisi of Egypt. Democratic backsliding can take several forms. The first of these are promissory coups. This is when an elected ruler is deposed and where elections are promised but seldom occur. Examples include the 2006 and 2014 coups in Thailand. The second form is called executive aggrandizement. This is when elected officials make step-by-step legal changes that make it harder for the opposition to challenge them. Indications of this have taken place in recent years in Israel, India, South Africa, and the United States. The third type is incremental election subversion. The subversion of free and fair elections through such actions as voter suppression, disqualification of opposition candidates, and denial of media access. Examples of this can be found in Russia and Venezuela. Much of the fault for this backsliding lies with dictators or would-be dictators using stealth methods to slowly gain power. They do this by the slow and steady subversion of democratic institutions. Levitsky and Ziblatt identify 4 key ways in which this might happen. There are a number of proposed causes for democratic backsliding that they mention. These include, number 1, the rejection of the political rules of the game. 2, denying the legitimacy of political opponents. 3, the encouragement of violence. And 4, the curtailing of civil liberties, especially the media. That's it for today. Thank you for watching. In future episodes, we will examine authoritarianism in detail, looking at its causes, durability, and of course, ways to fight back.